All right, are you rolling?
Yes, and Megan, remember to get right up in the
To get
middle
right
of
here. Okay. I just feel like Dad is so like has like such a peaceful voice, and my voice is like.
I sometimes, break out of my usual calming voice into like sudden peaks and,
Valleys.
yeah.
You,
Anyway,
but you have like an ASMR voice.
oh, really? Should I use my fingernails on the microphone?
Chapter 4.
Okay, well, welcome. Welcome to, what's this podcast called again?
Self-help.
Self-Help Hangover. Welcome to the Self-Help Hangover podcast.
We have been recording for like 3 hours.
No, this comes out every week. What are you talking about? Anyway, I'm Kirk, and this is Megan. Hi, Megan.
Hi, Kirk.
That's Dad to you. All right, so we are going to talk really quickly about Chapter 3 of Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich. Now, the title of this chapter is Faith. Now, tell me how scientific you think this first paragraph is, Megan.
Okay.
Okay. Faith is the head chemist of the mind. When faith is blended with the vibration of thought, the subconscious mind instantly picks up the vibration, translates it into its spiritual equivalent, and transmits it to infinite intelligence, as in the case of prayer.
I'm gonna need a third cup of coffee before I can. Just kidding, but let me think about that. So, faith is. Sorry.
Well, I'll just jump
Yeah,
in.
why don't you
Yeah,
tell us your thoughts?
I'll give you more time later in the episode because I don't want to take all the time. But I think there's a lot of assumptions in this paragraph.
I mean, I don't think you can be super scientific about how faith works.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a whole era of Christianity, and this is probably fits right in there, where they are reconciling the science and the physical world with faith, with the traditions that they've been handed faith-wise.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out. Well, I think there was a lot of philosophers and thinkers at the time that made a case for science and religion not being in conflict, but they're actually harmonious. And miracles are all done along scientific principles. We just don't understand the underlying physics or science behind those miracles.
Yeah.
And I can get behind that to an extent. I think trying to bring the rational and the intuitive together is a worthwhile endeavor. What's your take?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think obviously it's impossible to do that, like for certain, to know how science and spirituality connect, but I do think that they do definitely connect. And I mean, I think what comes to mind right now, this might not make sense, but just like how, just like seeing God in like everything, like when we learn about like how the body works on a cellular level, that feels very spiritual to me, because it's like, dang, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. So, and depending on your conception of God, then you can see that everywhere, right? Like
Yeah.
if you were saying earlier that you conceive of God as the universe, right?
Yeah.
And so the universe operating to the extent that there is the existence of our physical bodies that are so intricate and amazing.
Yeah.
It's inspiring in what we could say are spiritual ways, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, I think we're on the same page there.
Yeah.
But as we move on to the second paragraph, he continues with his science, which is to say that the emotions of faith, love, and sex
This is what I
are the
was
most
talking
powerful
about.
of all the major positive emotions.
Faith, love, and sex. I got them all right.
You did. Yes, you mentioned these in the last episode. So, I don't know. Are those emotions?
I'm trying to think about like what I would consider to be the three strongest emotions. 'Cause I would put like some anger in there or grief, but maybe that's like not the most productive feelings.
Okay. So you're saying that he's ranking his power ranking might be off.
Yeah. I'm trying to think like sex, like horniness.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's never really spelled out what he means by sex, does it? But he does say in the third paragraph, love and faith are psychic, related to the spiritual side of man and woman. Sex is, and non-binary
Binary.
people. Sex is purely biological, he says, and related only to the physical.
I think I agree that love is one of the strongest emotions and one of the drivers of excuse me, of our motivation to do things. It's funny because like when he says sex as one of the strongest emotions, it just all I can think about is how like I mean, yeah, like evolutionary from an evolutionary perspective, we were made to reproduce, and that's like one of our reproduce and survive. Those are like our two main things. But uh I don't really associate that with like obtaining success, but maybe that's just me.
Well, I mean, it's one of his major pillars, right? Like I think
Yeah.
maybe we'll get a little bit more into it, but there's something called sex transmutation. I think it's one of the later chapters, so we'll get that. We'll cross that
I
bridge when we
I
get to it.
think
But
I remember reading about that when I read this book the first time, but it's been so long, so we'll get there when we get there.
the next sentence, the mixing or blending of these three emotions has the effect of opening a direct line of communication between the finite thinking mind of man and infinite intelligence. You know what this reminds me so much of?
What?
Um, the Latter-day Saint idea that the spirit, and when the spirit and the body are combined, when spirit and physical matter are combined, oh, what is it? Oh my gosh, I'm having a mind blank. But that, like eternal joy comes from when they are. I think it's basically about it's a scripture about the resurrection. It says when matter and spirit are joined, never to be separated again, they achieve a fullness of joy or something like. I'll have to look it up.
Okay.
Maybe
No,
I can
I
bring
like that idea though. This may be vulgar, but it kind of reminds me of like like the Wolf of Wall Street kind of successful businessman who are like always banging ladies.
That's funny you should say that because the chapter talks about that, doesn't it? It says that he studied hundreds of successful men,
Yeah.
and that in all of the all cases, there was the love of a woman
Yeah, that is, I do
behind
remember
that
that.
success.
Yeah.
Where did that go? Let's see. From the analysis of life work and achievements of hundreds of men of outstanding accomplishment, that there was the influence of a woman's love back of nearly every one of them.
So, does that apply to you with one Amy Richards.
Yes, I mean, I would certainly attribute a lot of my success not only to her love, but also her actual support, like the
Yeah.
things that she's done in our business day to day to make things happen.
Yeah. That's awesome.
So we don't need to spend a lot of time on this chapter, but let me ask you this. So he says there's only one proven method of developing the emotion of faith.
I'm trying to remember what that was. One proven method.
It is by telling yourself, well, basically affirmation or
Okay.
repeated instructions to the subconscious mind through the principle of autosuggestion.
That's right. Yeah. Because I remember I wrote down that he talks a lot about communicating with infinite intelligence. And I thought that was kind of a cool term that I liked for a higher power. Infinite intelligence.
So do you think affirmations are the only way to build faith?
I don't think so. Just because I don't think affirmations are at all a part of a lot of religions. I mean, actually I shouldn't say that, but they're not a part of the Mormon church for sure.
Affirmations?
I mean, not like in the traditional way that I think about affirmations. Like they say that I remember like when I was starting to like think about affirmations and do them, I felt that like that was like super like woo woo like for the church, or like it was not. It felt like almost like going against the church because you're not supposed to like worship anything other than like the Mormon God. And like they just don't, I mean, they don't talk about affirmations. They don't teach to do that. They teach to like study the scriptures and to pray, but
Well, one thing that they do teach about is bearing a testimony,
that's true.
right?
Yeah.
Bearing a testimony, you can either do it up on the stand at the beginning of the month. There's a testimony meeting, or you could just do it to your friend, right?
Yeah.
Or in your family setting or whatever. But basically, you say, "This is what I know to be true," right? That's kind of the formulaic way of doing it.
That's true.
Some
Yeah.
people say you are supposed to say these things in a testimony. I know that this is true, etc. And it's also said that a testimony is gained in the bearing of it.
That is so interesting.
So it's pretty much the same as an affirmation.
It is,
right?
yeah.
It's just kind of like a specific affirmation that is dictated to you, like what it's supposed to be about.
That's honestly so true. I've never thought about it in that perspective, but that's so interesting because I mean, I want to say it's like that same principle of autosuggestion where like the words you say are put into your subconscious mind. And so that kind of reminds me of like when you say that you acquire deeper testimony through the bearing of it, that kind of feels like that same principle of like you're believing the words that you're saying.
Right. It's growing the faith of that principle in your mind.
Yeah.
And some people would say in your heart.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe he's right. Maybe the best way to create faith is by affirming or repeating instructions to
I
your
do
subconscious
think
mind.
for sure that the things you tell yourself are what you're going to believe. So if you're telling yourself something repeatedly, like whatever that is, even if it's something you don't even think about, like, oh, like if you mess up and you're always saying like, oh, I'm so stupid or something, like you start to believe that, or like just things that you say to yourself, you start to really internalize that and believe that. So even if it's not like conscious affirmations that you're writing down or saying every day, I think the repetition of things that you think or say start to internalize in your mind.
Yeah. That makes me think also of what, mom has put up on the fridge or someplace, that the mind can't take a joke. And what I think she means by that is if you're teasing people and saying mean things
Yeah.
about it, like those criticisms or cut downs still affect
It's still,
your
yeah.
mind,
Because your subconscious
even
mind,
if
I
you
feel
know
like,
it's a
doesn't
joke, you're still hearing those words in your
yeah,
head.
for sure. I definitely agree with
So
that.
yeah, we try
Yeah.
to avoid cheesing people in that way.
Yeah.
Anyway, he says repetition of affirmation of sorry. Napoleon Hill says in the book, repetition of affirmation of orders to your subconscious mind is the only known method of voluntary development of the emotion of faith. I don't know if I agree, but I do agree that that is a commonly used method.
Yeah.
Okay, so what else does he say? He says that the negative example of that is that when people first get exposed to crime, they hate it. But if they remain in contact with the crime, then they become accustomed to it and endure it. And then if they are around it long enough, they finally embrace it. That sounds a lot like The Godfather.
Does it? I've never seen The Godfather, but I'm trying to think of something that I could relate that to. Another mafia movie.
Well, something that's maybe closer to home is, in the news this week, a guy has pleaded guilty to, lots of counts of fraud for,
Yeah.
scamming people. That happens fairly regularly in Utah and in other places. But also, like years ago, he put on a conference, and at least 3 of the members on that promotional flyer for that conference have had charges brought against them in the
Yeah.
since that conference happened. So I don't know. There's just a kind of a culture of, I don't know, is it a scammy culture?
Maybe. I do think there's definitely like the environment that you're raised in or that you're around kind of becomes normalized to you. So if you're always around crime, that probably, especially if you were born in an environment where there's always crime, that probably feels normal to you because you don't know any other environment. So I could see that being a strong possibility that you would get involved. Like it honestly, like something that it reminds me of is like gangs, like where it's like, I mean, I don't know a lot about gangs, but like just from in shows, like there will always be a character who like hates the gang, like the gang, what do you call it? Like environment and hates gangs, but then they need like help or something. And so they get involved in this gang and then they can't get out or something. That's just what comes to
Yeah.
mind.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay, how about this one? The mind comes finally to take on the nature of the influences which dominate it.
Yeah, I agree with that.
It makes me think of that saying, in each of us is 2 wolves.
The it all depends on which one you feed.
Yeah, what do you think about that? The last time I saw that online, on X, somebody was comparing that to whether or not you read the Deseret News or the Salt Lake Tribune.
Oh my
Which wolf are you
gosh.
going to feed?
That is so funny.
I think
Wow.
that's a misapplication,
Yeah.
personally. But I don't know. I guess we could have that conversation. Anyway, another thing that I think is ironic about, or maybe misapplied in this chapter, is that he talks about Christianity being the greatest force for influencing people in this world, and that the basis of Christianity is faith. But in the same chapter, he talks about a woman being behind every great man, Now, there are a lot of Mormons that think that Jesus was married, but
Really?
there are a lot of, I would say that the larger Christian world does not believe
I
that.
have never heard.
So that's one
About
kind of
Jesus.
interesting irony,
Yeah.
that he thinks that you got to have a good woman behind you, but Jesus didn't. And then the other thing is we talked about the rain falling on the just and the unjust.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of kind of blamey stuff in this. If you have end up being poor or in distress, basically it's saying, well,
That's on you.
that's on you, homie.
Yeah, I think that's not an accurate thing to say.
When I think about that, I think of Tracy Chapman's Fast Car, one of the most beautiful songs ever written.
Yeah.
And when I listen to that song, I don't think, you didn't have good enough affirmations to that character. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The reason that song is powerful is because there's the truth of circumstances.
Yeah,
The
definitely.
truth of opportunities around us. And is it possible to break out of the opportunities and circumstances around us? Could be,
It could be.
But also, what is that person doing in that song? She's giving up her life for other people.
Yeah.
And so altruism might also be a source of
Yeah.
not being wealthy, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, something to think about. Let's do some advertisements really fast.
Okay. So,
Do you have anything you want to advertise, Megan? We don't really have other advertisers, so we're just going to advertise our own stuff.
yeah. So I have another podcast that I don't very regularly post on, but I am planning on posting more episodes once I finish my degree. But it's just called the Meg's Fitness Podcast, and you can follow me on Instagram at megs.fitness.
How do you spell Megs?
Oh yeah, so it's Maegs. So yeah, it's a little weird. Maegs fitness.
Megs.fitness on Instagram?
Yep.
And do you have a separate Instagram account for your podcast?
I do, yeah. It's just Meg's Fitness Podcast. No periods or spaces.
Do you want to advertise your training or anything?
Yeah, so I'm a personal trainer. I've been doing it for over 5 years. So I do one-on-one training and I do it in Payson. And then I also just teach fitness classes there. So if you ever are interested in personal training, feel free to DM me or reach out.
All right. Let's get back to the program. Okay, then he talks about being in the midst of the Great Depression and says this thing about Gandhi. Basically, if only our business leaders could be like Gandhi, we wouldn't have this Great Depression and we'd be happy and wealthy. Yeah, I mean, what I wrote in the margins here is if only we were more like Gandhi, we would all be rich.
Yeah. Okay, wait, so he's saying if the business, but then he talks about Gandhi that he doesn't have riches but he has power, but he's saying that if the government was like Gandhi, then we wouldn't be in a Great Depression.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge oversimplification.
Yeah.
So my understanding of the Great Depression is it was largely fueled by speculation. People like overextending themselves on debt for returns. And I'm not a historian, so everybody, we don't have an audience, but if anybody listens to this by the time this comes out, you can correct me in the comments or whatever. But basically, what Napoleon Hill says is there will come a day when employees as well as employers will discover the possibilities of faith. And that's what's keeping us. That's why we're in a depression. And that's
Huh.
what's keeping us from getting out of the depression. Now, he doesn't ever say anything about regulation, right?
Yeah.
Government involvement in preventing the exploitation of people or overextending themselves through speculation. And so I just find that interesting. Speculation being largely the cause of the Great Depression. And I lived through and worked through the Great Recession, which was
Yeah.
also caused by speculation.
Hmm.
Now, I believe that if there had been regulation in place to prevent hedge funds and also bad loans, like people were going way over and beyond in the debt that they could support with their income. And people were just buying houses like crazy to rent out on no interest loans. And just like,
Oh.
anyway, there's all this stuff going on. And Napoleon Hill says that if there was more faith and cooperation in business and industry, that these things wouldn't happen.
So is he saying like
That gives me an anti-regulation vibe, but I don't know. Yeah, finish your
so is he
question.
saying if everyone was like Gandhi because of the religious aspect, or does it say specifically?
Well, he doesn't want everybody to be Hindu, I don't think, but he does talk about Gandhi using the power of faith to get like millions of people to work together.
Work together towards the same
Right.
goal. Yeah, that makes sense.
And that's that's a beautiful goal.
Wish.
A
Yeah.
beautiful goal. But just the vibe that I get from looking at Napoleon Hill's career decisions makes me feel that like he might be a little bit on the regulation is bad side
Oh.
of things. But
Yeah.
that's speculation on my part. So speculation is bad when I do it and when the nation does it.
Yeah.
I don't know. Any thoughts about that?
I don't think so.
Okay, well, then he goes into this story about basically the consolidation of the major steel powers, right?
Yeah.
And he's relating this story because it's an example to him of how Charles Schwab had an idea.
Yeah.
And he brought this idea to the table to these giants of industry and was able to get them on the same page to where they consolidated and made a giant, like a giga, basically just a huge steel conglomerate.
Yeah.
And that made Charles Schwab a very rich man. And it was only because Charles had this idea that this happened.
So that's what he's saying. It's just because he had this idea.
That's what I'm getting out of it. Did you get something else out of it?
No. I didn't read that much into it. Like,
I mean, it's an interesting story of success, and also in the same story, he talks about all of these other guys that also had a similar idea, tried the same thing, and it didn't work.
oh,
But he just mentions them in passing.
interesting.
So I just think what he's neglecting here
Is
is like the
what he
macroeconomics. It's
Yeah.
like industry is naturally evolving based on the needs and the technologies of
Yeah,
the
for sure.
peoples that use them.
Well, yeah, seriously. I mean, not everyone is going to succeed just because they have an idea to do with the steel industry.
So Charles Schwab, I just think that this story shows that Charles Schwab had an idea, and it was the right place
And the right time. Well, that reminds me of
and it all came together.
Yeah, that reminds me of Outliers about, because you've read Outliers, right?
Yeah, I think so. It's been a while.
Yeah. But basically, like a big thing in Outliers is it talks about like people who have made it to like the 1% billionaires, super rich status. And a lot of times, the case from what the book is saying is that when like a lot of the times when these billionaires have been created is after like a depression or recession when the economy like comes back, there's like a big boom and they like jump on this opportunity to like have like with like oil or like banking or whatever, and like because it's that right time they were able to just like achieve massive success. So I think that also has a role to play.
Yeah, 100%. We can think of in today's era of tech giants, how
Yeah,
many people have an idea for a tech company
so many.
and work their tails off to make it happen, and what percentage of them succeed?
Well, it's
I
like
don't
me
know,
and
but I
Josh
would
talk about
guess it's
this all
pretty
the
small.
time. Yeah. Me and Josh talk about this all the time, but like the fact that Vine didn't succeed in the end and like disappeared, and then TikTok pops up and it's the exact same thing, but it was massive. And TikTok is like this huge thing. Everyone's on it, everyone's monetizing it. And so it's just really weird. It's like, is it like the timing or what's the deal there?
I think it just behooves people who have made a lot of money to
Yeah.
recognize the luck of timing. And I think more people today do that.
Yeah.
I would say that this book
Doesn't
doesn't do that
talk
so
about
much,
that.
but I would say a lot of people include that as an ingredient.
For sure. Yeah. I think timing is huge.
All right, so that's chapter 3, faith. Anything else you want to say about faith or the chapter, Megan?
Um, I also wanted to say this is back to the TikTok thing, but I almost feel like I mean, I don't know if this is going to sound weird, but like since TikTok, like I feel like TikTok really blew up right during COVID, and that was when everyone was like stuck in their houses and just were on social media, and so maybe that has something to do with it, but
Yeah, I mean, there's so many
factors.
factors, and I feel kind of lucky that I my art career started when websites were becoming, you know, commonplace.
Yeah.
At one point, I thought I need to be able to, if my little brother can program a website as a 10-year-old, that might be an exaggeration. Might have been a little bit older, but I was like, I got to be able to figure this out. I went to the library, checked out an HTML for Dummies book, and just started making a simple website. And so that gave me a lot of freedom to sell my work outside of the established kind of gallery
Yeah.
method. And so that gave me a lot of autonomy there. And then when Instagram came along,
I was gonna
I was an
say
early
you were
user
one
of
of yeah,
Instagram. And so that
yeah.
was really a great tool for me. And I kind of rode that wave up the popularity of Instagram.
Yeah, because you were using Instagram when it first came out. Because I remember it was super new, and I like got an account, but I was like, I didn't even know. Like, I just thought it was an app to like put filters on your face.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, because I remember I was like using your Instagram and I was like using it to like do the filters, but I kept like posting them. I didn't know they were like posting on like a social media. You probably deleted them, but
I mean, that does make me think that there are, it did take faith to go check out the book from the library. It did take faith to explore a new app.
yeah.
Because I could have been curmudgeonly about it and said, no, I'm not interested. I'm gonna, do the traditional route or whatever.
Yeah, definitely. I mean that
Um,
that takes some bravery to try that out.
so maybe that factors into it as well. You need, some people say you create your own luck. Certainly, I think that you position yourself to be able to take advantage of opportunities through education, pushing yourself, having the skills needed when the time comes.
Yeah.
Right?
Definitely. Yeah, and I think just like recognizing opportunities and being able to being like in the mindset that you're looking for opportunities and you're manifesting your goals, so you recognize like, oh, I'm gonna try doing this, and then it succeeds or it doesn't. But
Yeah. I have an artist friend also that said it's good to clarify your goals so then you can recognize a good opportunity when it comes along.
yeah,
Because if you
definitely.
don't kind of have direction or you don't have things that you're after, you might not be sure which opportunity to chase.
Yeah,
Right?
definitely. So
So,
yeah, I think that if you're working towards your goal, then you'll be able to recognize those opportunities and recognize when an opportunity comes up, and you'll be ready for that.
yeah.
But anyways,
Okay,
we
well,
can wrap
that's
this
Faith,
up.
chapter 3. Join us next time for chapter 4.
Awesome. Thank you.